A high-ranking officer in the China's People's Liberation Army collaborated on virus research with a scientist who was later fired from Canada's high-security infectious disease Lab 4 in Winnipeg. Major General Chen Wei, who is praised by President Xi Jinping for developing a Chinese COVID-19 vaccine, had partnered with Dr. Chu, ahead of the vaccine development and antiviral therapies section at the Canadian lab. They collaborated on 2 scientific papers on Ebola in 2016 and 2020. Those papers did not identify Major General Chen as a high-ranking officer and the Chinese military's top epidemiologist and virologist. Instead, she is named as Wei Chen, PhD, who worked at the Beijing Institute of Biotechnology. In July 2019, Dr. Chu and her husband, a fellow scientist, Kading Cheng, along with a group of Chinese students, were removed by the police from Winnipeg's high-security lab. Canadian news outlet The Globe and Mail has reported that the RCMP, which is Canadian Federal Police, were investigating whether the 2 dismissed scientists passed on Canadian intellectual property to China, including to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Dr. Chu and her husband were finally fired from the Winnipeg lab in January of this year. Citing privacy and national security concerns, the federal government has refused to provide more details of why Chu and Cheng were fired. Months before she was removed, Dr. Chu sent one of the deadliest viruses in the world and multiple varieties of it to China's Wuhan Institute of Virology, which does gain-of-function experiments and has links to the Chinese military. Dr. Chu also traveled to lab in Wuhan on official trips. Canadian opposition party requested from the Trudeau government release of all documentation related to the firing of the 2 scientists. However, Liberals prevented release of the documents, citing national security. The request also included documents related to the transfer of deadly Ebola viruses to the Wuhan lab. Later, the order to produce the documents was terminated due to the federal election. Conservative Member of Parliament Garnet Janu suggested that the reason the Prime Minister called the recent election was to avoid releasing documentation related to the Winnipeg lab.